Fade iron. A tense courtroom, fluorescent lights buzzing softly. The room is packed, lawyers, journalists, and spectators, all waiting for the trial to begin. A black defendant, Jordan Reeves, sits at the defense table, his hands clasped tightly together. Across from him, a smug, well-dressed lawyer, Richard Calloway, shuffles his papers with an air of superiority. The presiding judge, Judge Catherine Monroe, an older woman with piercing eyes, observes everything in silence. Narrator, VO. In a world where justice is meant to be blind, reality often paints a different picture. This is the story of a courtroom showdown that no one saw coming. A story of arrogance, prejudice, and an unexpected response that left the entire courtroom stunned. Camera pans across the room, showing the jury, some skeptical, some indifferent. The tension is thick in the air. The case at hand? Jordan Reeves, a middle-class black man, accused of a crime he swears he did not commit. The evidence against him is flimsy at best, but that doesn't stop his opponent from using every trick in the book to make him look guilty. That opponent? Richard Calloway, a high-profile lawyer with a reputation for ruthless tactics, and, as some whisper, a habit of looking down on defendants who don't fit his mold of respectability. As the case unfolds, Calloway sees an opportunity, not just to win, but to humiliate. To remind Jordan, and everyone like him, of their supposed place in society. Flashbacks. Clips of Calloway in previous cases aggressively interrogating defendants, smirking at judges, winning cases that seemed unwinnable. His reputation precedes him. But today? Today would be different. Because today, he'd meet his match in Judge Catherine Monroe. Cut to Judge Monroe sitting tall, observing both parties, her fingers gently tapping on the desk, a knowing look in her eyes, as if she already senses where this is going. The courtroom drama begins. The bailiff calls the room to order, and proceedings begin. Calloway stands, adjusting his expensive suit before glancing condescendingly at Jordan. His opening statement is poised, persuasive, but beneath the surface, it carries something else. A subtle, insidious undertone. Calloway. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today to decide a very simple matter. A matter of accountability of law, of ensuring that justice is served, regardless of, background or circumstance. He smirks slightly, just enough for Jordan to notice. Jordan shifts in his seat, feeling the weight of those words. He's heard them before, in different forms. Calloway continues, his tone dripping with faux politeness, carefully constructing a narrative that paints Jordan as irresponsible, untrustworthy. He doesn't attack directly. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, he weaves a story, subtly nudging the jury to see Jordan not as a man, but as a stereotype. Calloway. Now, some may argue that Mr. Reeves had no choice, that his actions were a product of circumstances beyond his control. But isn't it the duty of every citizen to abide by the law, regardless of upbringing? His eyes flicker toward the jury, gauging their reaction. Some nod. Others remain impassive. Jordan clenches his fists under the table. He knew this would happen. He knew Calloway wouldn't just argue the case. He'd turn it into a performance. A spectacle designed to paint Jordan as yet another statistic, rather than a man fighting for his life. The courtroom remains silent, the air thick with unspoken words. Judge Monroe watches intently, making no move to interject. Not yet. Cut to close-up on Judge Monroe's hands, resting calmly on the desk, the faintest twitch of her fingers. She lets Calloway continue, allows him to dig himself deeper into the image he's so carefully crafting. She's seen lawyers like him before. She knows exactly how to handle this. The weight of injustice. For Jordan, this isn't just about today. It's about a lifetime of being seen as less than, of working twice as hard to prove himself, only to be met with doubt. This trial isn't just about the charges against him. It's about fighting back against a system that's never been in his favor. Flashback to Jordan as a child, being told to be careful around the police. Jordan as a young man, watching his peers get treated unfairly in school. Jordan as an adult, realizing that no matter how hard he worked, some people would always assume the worst. Back in the courtroom, Calloway keeps pushing. Calloway. Now, Your Honor, I must say, I find it interesting that the defense claims there is no real evidence against Mr. Reeves. Because, you see, the mere presence of doubt does not equate to innocence. And let's not forget. He pauses, flashing a small, satisfied smile. That perception is often reality. A murmur ripples through the courtroom. The words are subtle, but the implication is clear. Calloway isn't just trying to argue facts, he's trying to shape how the jury sees Jordan. For the first time, Judge Monroe moves. She leans forward, slowly, deliberately, her gaze locking onto Calloway's. The room falls into a hush, as if sensing that something is about to shift. Jordan swallows hard, unsure of what's coming next. But Calloway? Calloway still looks smug. He thinks he has this case in the bag. Little does he know. His moment of reckoning is just around the corner. Fade out as the tension builds, setting the stage for what comes next. Fade in. The courtroom remains tense. Judge Monroe leans back slightly, still watching Calloway, her expression unreadable. The jury shifts in their seats. Jordan exhales slowly, knowing that the worst is yet to come. Narrator, VO. Justice isn't just about laws, it's about perception. And perception? That can be weaponized. Richard Calloway wasn't just arguing a case. He was constructing an image, one designed to make Jordan Reeves look guilty, not because of evidence, but because of who he was. Calloway's subtle attacks. Calloway straightens his tie, stepping toward the jury, exuding confidence. He thrives in these moments. His reputation is built on winning, on twisting narratives until his version of the truth becomes reality. Calloway. Ladies and gentlemen, consider the facts. The prosecution has laid out clear inconsistencies in Mr. Reeves' story. His whereabouts? Unclear. His alibi? Questionable at best. And his past? Well, let's just say it raises certain concerns. Jordan stiffens. He knows where this is going. He's seen this tactic before, digging up old, irrelevant incidents to paint a damaging picture. Judge Monroe's eyes narrow slightly, but she lets Calloway continue. Calloway, smirking slightly. Now, I'm not saying Mr. Reeves is a criminal, but I do believe we must consider patterns. After all, past behavior often speaks volumes, does it not? A hushed murmur spreads through the courtroom. Calloway's words are carefully chosen. He's not outright accusing Jordan of a pattern of criminal behavior, but he's planting the seed. A tactic often used against black defendants to frame them as habitual offenders. Jordan grips the edge of the table. He wants to speak up, to object, but his lawyer places a firm hand on his arm, signaling him to stay calm. The weight of racial bias in the legal system. The jury watches, some taking notes, others avoiding Jordan's gaze. He's used to that too. The quiet assumptions. The unspoken biases. Flashback. Jordan at a store, being followed by a security guard. Jordan at a job interview, noticing the hesitation in the interviewer's voice. Jordan being pulled over for no reason, the officer's hand already on his holster. This isn't just about today. It's about a lifetime of being guilty until proven innocent. Judge Monroe finally speaks. Judge Monroe, calm, measured. Mr. Calloway, I trust you are aware that we are here to discuss the evidence in this case, not to speculate on character without basis. Calloway smiles, feigning innocence. Calloway, with a polite nod. Of course, Your Honor. I was merely establishing context. After all, the jury must have a complete picture of the man before them. Jordan's lawyer, a sharp but reserved man named David Walker, finally stands. Walker, firmly. Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution is clearly attempting to sway the jury with unrelated character implications. Judge Monroe holds up a hand, silencing them both. Judge Monroe, coolly. Sustained. Mr. Calloway, I suggest you tread carefully. This is a courtroom, not a theater. Some in the courtroom chuckle quietly. Calloway's smirk falters for just a moment before he regains his composure. Calloway doubles down. But Calloway isn't done. If anything, he's irritated now. He doesn't like being challenged, especially not by a judge who isn't easily swayed. He pivots, moving toward his next tactic, discrediting Jordan's credibility through interrogation. Calloway, turning to Jordan, smug. Mr. Reeves, let's go over your version of events one more time, shall we? Jordan exhales, sitting up straighter. He's prepared for this. Calloway, pretending to be patient, you claim you were at home the night of the incident. Yet, we have a witness who places you near the scene. How do you explain that? Jordan, steady, but firm. I was at home. I have someone who can confirm that. Calloway, raising an eyebrow. Ah, yes. Your friend. A friend with no documented proof of being with you at the time? Jordan's jaw tightens. Judge Monroe watches closely, noting Calloway's choice of words. Judge Monroe, interrupting, sharp. Mr. Calloway, I trust you will refrain from making unnecessary insinuations about the defendant's witnesses? Calloway hesitates. The judge's tone has shifted slightly, less neutral, more firm. He nods, but the irritation is evident. Breaking the defendant down, Calloway continues pressing Jordan, asking leading questions, twisting his words. Calloway, so, if you were home, why didn't you immediately call the police when you heard about the incident? Surely, an innocent man would be eager to clear his name? Jordan exhales. Jordan, calmly, but with weight in his voice. Because I knew no one would believe me. The courtroom falls silent. For the first time, Calloway falters. Just slightly. He wasn't expecting that answer. Judge Monroe leans forward, eyes narrowing slightly. The judge begins to turn the tide. The tension in the room has shifted. Calloway senses it, but refuses to back down. Calloway, recomposing himself, scoffing slightly. No one would believe you? Mr. Reeves, are you suggesting our legal system is biased? Jordan holds his gaze. Jordan, steady, unwavering. I don't have to suggest it. The numbers speak for themselves. Flash cut. Statistics flash on screen. Black defendants receive longer sentences than white defendants for the same crimes. Studies showing racial disparities in wrongful convictions. Headlines of cases where innocent men spent decades behind bars. Judge Monroe lets the silence linger before finally speaking. Judge Monroe, calm, but pointed. Mr. Calloway, I'd advise you not to ask questions you may not like the answers to. A quiet ripple of reaction spreads through the courtroom. Calloway stiffens, his face betraying his frustration. The judge isn't playing along with his tactics. Jordan exhales slowly, gripping the edges of his chair. He's still not sure how this will end, but for the first time in this trial, he feels like someone is actually listening. Fade out as the weight of the moment hangs in the air. Fade in. The courtroom remains silent, the weight of Jordan's last words hanging in the air. Calloway, visibly irritated, adjusts his tie. He isn't used to being challenged like this, not by a defendant and certainly not by a judge. He clears his throat, forcing himself to regain composure. Narrator, VO. For years, the legal system has been shaped by biases, some subtle, some glaringly obvious. Calloway wasn't just fighting to convict Jordan Reeves. He was fighting to maintain the illusion that the system was fair, that justice was blind. But today, that illusion was starting to crack. The prosecution's weak case starts to fall apart. Calloway takes a breath before continuing, deciding to shift focus. Calloway, feigning politeness. Very well, Mr. Reeves. Let's move past that. Let's focus on the evidence. Your fingerprints, found near the crime scene. Care to explain that? Jordan stays composed. Jordan, I've been to that area before. I work near there. Calloway, raising an eyebrow. Convenient. Jordan's lawyer, David Walker, interjects. Walker, calm, but firm. Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution is leading the witness and misrepresenting facts. The fingerprint in question was found on a public railing outside the location, hardly incriminating. Judge Monroe nods. Judge Monroe, sternly to Calloway. Sustained. Mr. Calloway, I'd advise you to stick to presenting facts, not implications. Calloway's jaw tightens. He pivots, deciding to play his next card. Calloway, to the jury, gesturing dramatically. Let's consider another fact then. Mr. Reeves did not immediately provide an alibi when questioned. Suspicious, isn't it? Jordan clenches his jaw. He knew this was coming. Judge Monroe raises an eyebrow. Judge Monroe, interrupting Calloway. Actually, let's talk about that, Mr. Calloway. Would you like to remind the court why Mr. Reeves didn't provide an alibi immediately? A beat of silence. Calloway hesitates. Judge Monroe leans forward. Judge Monroe, coolly, flipping through documents. Let me help. According to the police report, Mr. Reeves was interrogated for 4 hours without legal representation. Is that correct? A murmur spreads through the courtroom. Calloway shifts uncomfortably. Calloway, avoiding eye contact. The police were conducting a standard interview. Judge Monroe, cutting him off, voice sharp. 4 hours without a lawyer is not a standard interview, Mr. Calloway. And during that time, Mr. Reeves repeatedly asked for an attorney, which was denied. Would you like me to read the transcript? Calloway's confidence wavers. The jury watches closely, taking in every word. Jordan exhales, relief washing over him. Someone was finally acknowledging what had happened. The defense begins to turn the tables. David Walker seizes the moment. He stands, approaching the jury. Walker, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the facts that actually matter. The prosecution wants you to believe my client is guilty based on circumstance and innuendo. But what do we really know? He paces slowly, letting his words sink in. Walker, there is no direct evidence tying Mr. Reeves to this crime. No surveillance footage. No eyewitnesses identifying him at the scene. And now, we've just learned that his initial statements were made under coercion, without legal counsel. Does that sound like justice to you? The jury members exchange glances. The tide is shifting. Judge Monroe turns to Calloway. Judge Monroe, firmly. Mr. Calloway, given this revelation, I assume you'll be providing solid forensic evidence to support your claims? Because so far, all I've heard is speculation. Calloway hesitates. The surprise witness. Just then, the door at the back of the courtroom opens. A woman steps in, nervous, but determined. Jordan's eyes widen. He knows her. It's Lisa Carter, a co-worker of his. She was with him the night of the incident. Walker turns toward her. Walker, surprised but hopeful. Your Honor, the defense requests a brief recess to introduce a new witness. Judge Monroe nods. Judge Monroe. Granted. Court will reconvene in 20 minutes. Fade out as Calloway clenches his fists, realizing his case may be slipping away. Fade in. The courtroom buzzes with murmurs as people whisper among themselves. The arrival of Lisa Carter has changed everything. Calloway looks frustrated, while Jordan sits up straighter, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time since the trial began. Narrator, VO. One witness. That's all it takes to tip the scales of justice. For days, Jordan Reeves sat in that courtroom, painted as a criminal. But now? Now, the truth was walking through those doors. Lisa Carter takes the stand. Lisa sits nervously in the witness chair. Walker approaches her, offering a reassuring nod. Walker, calm, supportive. Ms. Carter, could you please state your full name and occupation for the record? Lisa, clearing throat. Lisa Carter. I work as a waitress at Benny's Diner. Walker. And on the night of the incident in question, do you recall where you were? Lisa nods. Lisa, firmly. Yes. I was with Jordan Reeves. He was with me the entire night. A hush falls over the courtroom. Calloway shifts in his seat, quickly flipping through his notes. Walker, leaning in slightly. Lisa, can you be absolutely certain about that? Lisa, nodding. Yes. We were at my apartment watching a movie. I even sent him a text message that night, which should have a timestamp. He couldn't have been anywhere near that crime scene. Walker turns to the judge. Walker, Your Honor, I'd like to submit this text message as evidence. It proves Jordan Reeves was nowhere near the crime scene at the time of the incident. Judge Monroe takes the document, scanning it carefully. After a moment, she nods and hands it to the clerk to enter into evidence. Judge Monroe, looking to Calloway. Mr. Calloway, do you have any objections? Calloway exhales sharply. He doesn't, and he knows it. Calloway, begrudgingly. No objections, Your Honor. The prosecution's case crumbles. Walker seizes the moment, turning back to Lisa. Walker. Lisa, have you been contacted by law enforcement regarding this case before today? Lisa hesitates, then nods. Lisa, quietly. Yes. I told them I was with Jordan, but they didn't take my statement. They said they had enough evidence and that my information wasn't necessary. Gasps ripple through the courtroom. Jordan clenches his fists. Of course. They ignored evidence that didn't fit their narrative. Judge Monroe's face darkens. Judge Monroe, to Calloway, sternly, Mr. Calloway, is this true? Did law enforcement dismiss a potential alibi witness? Calloway hesitates. He looks flustered, his usual confidence cracking. Calloway, carefully choosing his words. Your Honor, the investigation was conducted by the authorities, and I can only present the evidence given to me. Judge Monroe, sharply. That is not what I asked. Calloway stiffens, realizing he's been cornered. The jury begins to see the truth. Walker takes a deep breath, turning to the jury. Walker, measured, confident. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we've been dealing with. A rushed investigation. A prosecution built on weak evidence and dangerous assumptions. And now? We have proof that an alibi witness was dismissed because she didn't fit the story they wanted to tell. The jury members shift in their seats. The doubt is evident now. Walker walks over to Jordan, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Walker, firm, emotional. Jordan Reeves is not a criminal. He is not the man the prosecution has tried to make him out to be. He is an innocent man who was nearly convicted because of bias, because of negligence, and because our system too often sees young black men as guilty before they've even spoken a word in their defense. Silence. Heavy. The jury looks at Jordan, not as a defendant, but as a human being. Judge Monroe takes a stand. Judge Monroe folds her hands together, her expression unreadable. Then, she exhales slowly and speaks. Judge Monroe, even, but with weight. In light of this new evidence, and given the concerning conduct of the investigation, I see no justifiable reason to proceed further with this case. Jordan's breath catches. Judge Monroe, firmly, addressing the courtroom. I am dismissing all charges against Jordan Reeves, effective immediately. The courtroom erupts. Jordan lets out a breath he didn't even realize he was holding. Walker grips his shoulder, smiling. Lisa clasps her hands together, tears forming in her eyes. The jury members exchange glances, some relieved, some ashamed that they had almost convicted an innocent man. Calloway stands frozen. He's lost. Judge Monroe turns to him one last time. Judge Monroe, pointed. And Mr. Calloway, I strongly suggest you reflect on the tactics you employed in this courtroom. Justice is about truth, not winning at any cost. Fade out as Calloway lowers his head, realizing the weight of what he's done. Fade in. The courtroom has emptied, but Jordan Reeves remains seated at the defense table, still processing what just happened. The weight of weeks, months, of stress begins to lift. David Walker sits beside him, offering a reassuring pat on the back. Narrator, VO. For Jordan, the nightmare was over. But the scars? They would last much longer. Today, he walked out of this courtroom a free man. But how many others weren't so lucky? Jordan's emotional release. Lisa Carter rushes up to Jordan, pulling him into a hug. Lisa, voice shaking. I'm so sorry this even happened to you. Jordan blinks rapidly, overwhelmed. Jordan, softly, almost to himself. They really were gonna throw me away. Like my life didn't matter. Walker sighs, shaking his head. Walker, serious, but kind. They do it every day, Jordan. You fought back. But the system isn't designed for people like you to win. Jordan clenches his fists. He was lucky, but what about the ones who weren't? Lisa pulls back, looking at Jordan intently. Lisa, what are you gonna do now? Jordan exhales, looking around the now empty courtroom. Jordan, determined, voice steady. Make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. The system gets challenged. News of Jordan's wrongful prosecution spreads quickly. Social media explodes with outrage. Hashtags flood the internet. Small Blue Diamond hashtag Justice for Jordan. Small Blue Diamond hashtag End Racial Bias. Small Blue Diamond hashtag Reform the System. The press digs into Calloway's past cases. What they find is damning patterns of disproportionately harsh prosecutions against black defendants, cases with weak evidence, and an alarming number of wrongful convictions. Judge Monroe, disturbed by what she witnessed, issues a formal complaint against Calloway, triggering an ethics investigation. Soon after, Calloway resigns from his position, his career in ruins. Meanwhile, the police department faces scrutiny for its handling of Jordan's case. The public demands change. Protests erupt, calling for accountability, transparency, and justice reform. Jordan finds his purpose. Months pass. Jordan, once just another name in a broken system, becomes a powerful voice for justice. He partners with advocacy groups, speaking at rallies, sharing his story on national news, and fighting for criminal justice reform. He helps launch a legal aid initiative to provide free defense for wrongly accused individuals, ensuring no one else faces what he did alone. One day, he stands outside the courthouse where his life nearly ended, speaking to a crowd. Jordan, passionate, raw emotion in his voice. I was lucky, but luck should never determine whether you walk free or spend your life in a cage. The system isn't broken. It was built this way. And if we don't fight to change it, more innocent people will lose everything. We can't let that happen. The crowd erupts in applause. Jordan looks out at the sea of faces, different races, backgrounds, ages, all united for one cause. And for the first time in a long time, he feels hope. Final reflection. As Jordan walks away from the courthouse, the weight on his shoulders feels lighter. He isn't just a defendant anymore. He's an advocate, a fighter, a survivor. Narrator, VO. The truth is, justice isn't always found in a courtroom. Sometimes it has to be fought for in the streets, in the laws we change, and in the voices we refuse to silence. Jordan Reeves was almost another statistic. Instead, he became something more. Fade to black. The sound of a gavel echoes one last time.